So, Femi, you set your book and you based it in Peckham and in the upper world, but you spent a lot of your kind of physics formative years, I guess, at Oxford. So, was there ever a kind of thought in your head that that would be the sort of other setting, or was it always going to be Peckham and the upper world?
Yeah, I mean, my life is actually a lot more complicated than the summary you gave. And something I always struggle with, actually, sort of trying to figure out how to even describe it. You probably did a better job than I did, than I ever do. But I think, I've grown up in quite a few different places, but Peckham is probably the one that's always been consistent. I moved here when I was sort of, I think, 10 years old. And there's a part of my book which takes place in 2036, I think. So that's quite far in the future, and I had to sort of make predictions about the future. And so it was useful to have a place like Peckham, which I've seen 2 decades of change in, to sort of have that as a basis for extrapolating what might come next. So that was definitely one justification. But I think, yeah, just almost speaking from the heart, I definitely have a strong connection here in the sense that it feels like home. I think, when I look at both my Nigerian heritage, but also my British heritage as well. So just like that kind of combination means that it can be difficult to feel comfortable in a lot of places. And I think Peckham is probably one of the only places where you get a lot of people who are equally as confused as me. And it just makes it a really interesting place. If you walk down Rye Lane on any given day, you're going to see a couple of things that make you laugh. And so just thinking about trying to write a book that was funny. That was actually a big goal of this book, to actually have moments that made you laugh. Just yeah, I wanted to have a sort of backdrop that would support that quite easily. And once I made that choice, yeah, there was no going back. Oxford would have been interesting, but I don't think anywhere is interesting as Peckham.
And I think you did that really well. You bring those real world moments in, and someone like myself really feel like we've seen that kind of thing. So it was kind of those moments that it kind of brings it to life in a really real way, and yet there's unreal things about it.
Yeah.
Now, you know, there must have been a time when you suddenly thought to yourself, gosh, I'm really interested in science and physics and maths. And myself and my brother, very, very different. He's a PhD mathematician, I'm not. And we kind of saw things very differently. So when was that turning point for you in your sort of growing up period, that you suddenly start thinking in this kind of slightly different way about how, I mean, you must have started understanding maths in a different way?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I was actually not very good at school, and definitely not good at maths or science. And I struggled. But there's a couple of things that happened. One, I had this mate who, I think I was sort of 11, probably 11 at the time. He told me about nuclear weapons for the first time. The idea that you have these warheads. When you think about the atom bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima, I think that went on to kill sort of more than 100,000 people, like half of those people sort of almost instantly. And the amount of material, the amount of fissile material that was actually detonated, was probably around the size of this book. um,
Wow.
and so it just boggled me. It didn't make sense that you could have, I mean, it's also terrified me. So as a little kid thinking that you have thousands of these nukes out there. So that kept me up at night, thinking about it. But also just this idea that something that small could produce something that big.
Mm.
Yeah, it's sort of the phrase that always that sort of it always conjures up for me is something deeply hidden. This idea that within reality, in and around of us, there's something that is hidden but incredibly powerful. And understanding it the same way that the folks who created those weapons understood that if you look inside an atom, there's incredible amounts of energy. Um, just that just kind of fascinated me, and it led to curiosity. And I think curiosity is really the main thing. Once you can get that spark in, um, then you're sort of off to the races. I guess I also have to credit a guy named John Carpenter, who this is when I was at school. He wasn't actually a teacher, but I always hesitate to tell this story because it sounds really cheesy. And it sounds cheesy. B, it sounds like I'm making up, and C, it sounds like something from Goodwill Hunting. Um, but nah, he was a janitor, who I think I said something maybe about these nukes, and he gave me a physics book. And I read it, and he kind of gave me a couple more and kind of explained a few things to me. And my mates thought I was kind of weird for chatting to the janitor in break time. But that initial curiosity that I had, it was crucial. And I think this applies to anybody, kids or adults learning something, to have something to follow up, to feed that curiosity. So that was really what built a sort of basis. And I would say a lot of things I learned when I was that age, sort of 11, 12, carried me through all the way to uni. Because I think physics, once you, especially if you get it young, but I think definitely if you get it old as well, there's a lot of things in there. Once you break down that few key points, then it unleashes a whole new level of understanding, and things become much more easy after that.
And it's a really crucial thing, isn't it? That kind of first person to manage to somehow open that sort of little trapdoor and let that sort of information that they want to give you suddenly
Yeah.
have some relevance. And so, great credit to John there, who's obviously like made a huge difference to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I called him up. Yeah, and you know how we're all pretty bad at sort of looking back to our teachers and kind of thanking them for the work they did. And a lot of it isn't really paid for, in the sense that they don't have to do it. But yeah, no, I'm fortunate to have had a couple of people who gave me the time to sort of pique my interest and see what I could do.